Hello viewers, welcome back to Mack Truck Bookstop. The young should not read The Water Margin, and the old should not read Romance of the Three Kingdoms. As I am neither, as I consider, young nor old, I have read them both in recent years. Water Margin is one of the four great classics of ancient China, and my name is Mike, and today we're going to continue our Reading the World journey, talking about this. I can't call it good. It's astounding. It's thought-provoking. It is page-turning. It's hilarious. Actually, laugh out loud hilarious. It's shocking. It's devastating. It's truly an immoral book. But I don't know. I think it does raise the question. One of the major themes is reading an immoral book valuable, or a book that shows immorality to this extent? And there's some debate about that. But basically, some will call this a Robin Hood of China. Now, I've read a Robin Hood of Turkey, if you go back to video number 10, which was Mehmed my hawk, and that book could not be more different from the tale of Robin Hood, and this is also in its complete own world. Yeah, so the comparison to Robin Hood with all these legends and tales of outlaws in different parts of the world, really the only thing that unites them is that they are stories about outlaws. And if that's your only uniting factor, each one has its own lessons on morality and things you can debate and views on the world. I think there's a reason that the outlaw tale is so prevalent in the world, because it really is a question of when is it right to fight against a corrupt society? When does the government become unfixable? When is being an outlaw the only solution to the problems of a power vacuum that's created by corruption? These are all questions that the Water Margin presents us with. But first and foremost, it is a rip-roaring, entertaining tale. Some background: it was written in technically the 1300s, around the 1300s in China, during the end of the Mongol occupation of China, just like Romance of the Three Kingdoms, and some even speculate that they are by the same author. There's a whole backstory to this that I am not really in a position to talk about, but it is very interesting to imagine Naian being just a pseudonym of the author of the Three Kingdoms, which I did read a few years back and have here. And I'm not going to be able to help comparing and contrasting them. See, I've got them here. Two big thick tomes, that pages yellowed. I've got writing in all the books from when I read them a few years ago. Now, I'm going to be comparing and contrasting them, I'm sure, more in this video, and I think it's likely to be a long video, so grab a drink and settle up. So the way I got through these books, and it would have been much harder to do it had I not had these amazing podcasts from John Zhu, who he is fluent in Chinese and he reads these books and does these whole podcasts. He's done a full one on Romance of the Three Kingdoms and on Water Margin, and you can listen to these. He goes chapter by chapter and really breaks things down in a digestible way. So it's just amazing to read along with his podcast. So as far as like an analysis of the action of the book and the cultural context, you're not going to get better than that. I highly recommend it, and I'm going to link his podcasts in the links in my video, so that if you are interested in these books, this is the way I think to get into them as a modern reader. Otherwise, it could be very difficult. So, Margin, I was saying, it was just extraordinarily funny. Um, the the opening of the book is basically um, this corrupt magistrate opens, or a corrupt official ignores the signage on this big hall that's called the Hall of Demons, and orders his men to open it despite all of their reclamations that he should not do this. And so he releases from this chamber 108 demons that fly off to all parts of China, and it's never quite explained how this works, because there's an index right in the beginning of this version of the book that's 100. It shows the names of the 108 heroes of the Marsh. What the alternate title of Water Margin is Outlaws of the Marsh. So you can see it's you're in for a long haul. I mean, this is 800. This is 800 pages. It's a big, thick thing, and there's 108 heroes plus other characters that you're going to have to keep track of. But it's really not as intimidating as it seems. The index really does help, because it tells you the chapter that they first appear in. And of course, they are going to be recruited as the book goes on to the Outlaws of the Marsh, who are all, their main hideout is this big mountain in the middle of a swamp. Basically, and it's a very visual image. It's a very fantastical and epic kind of image that carries throughout this novel. There is, for example, some very important parts that happen during Blue Lantern festivals. So the culture, kind of the daily culture of the Song dynasty, of which the story takes place in, is kind of shown. Even though this was written hundreds of years, I'd say 400, 500, maybe less, 300 years after. I don't know. It's written long after the events of the book supposedly take place. But so these demons are released into the world, and then we cut to basically this this dumb jock kind of character who works his way up to a high-ranking position in the government by being a good football player. And yes, like football, like soccer. It's ancient Chinese soccer, which I'll probably butcher this pronunciation, but it's spelled Ceju in the book, Seju. And it's it's like soccer, except the goals are like high up, and but it's played with the foot and a ball, so let's just call it football. He's a football player that becomes a high-ranking official just because somebody likes his football playing, and he becomes a rather corrupt official that throws his weight around and bullies one of the people who you think is going to become like the main character, because he gets basically in trouble with the law just because he was sick and couldn't make it when he was summoned. And so yeah, you think this guy's going to be the main character, but he's really just one of many heroes, in quotation marks, that are going to appear as this novel goes on and become recruited by the Outlaws of the Marsh. And then you get Lu Du, or Lu Jixin, who is like this this military man who through use of excessive force accidentally kills a guy he's trying to police, and so has to go into exile to become a monk based on the recommendation of his friend to a monastery. Yet when he gets to this monastery, he starts like destroying the idols and drinking like he's not supposed to, and beating up the other monks. And it's just this part is just so hilarious. I was laughing out loud for like the first, I don't know, sixth of this book, because it's just kind of like lighthearted fun, even though there are a few like darker moments. But then the book takes a turn. As you get into it, the book starts to take a turn and things get a little darker. especially regarding like treatment of women in this novel. You know, you've got lots of adultery and prostitutes, and you've got women who are conniving and men who are conniving, and you've got basically all this these people that end up getting um, outrageously, they die pretty outrageous deaths sometimes for their supposed crimes of morality, but of course they're being killed by the quote unquote heroes, and some moments are just incredibly shocking. Like these heroes, these outlaws are not your friendly steal from the rich, give to the poor. Although there is some of that, they are vicious men. These are like pirates back in the day, like real pirates. You know, like they they uh, they murder a lot of innocents, and they, at least, and especially by our modern standards, they are portrayed heroic when they kill some people in pretty grisly and gruesome ways. This is a very violent book, um, and this is where the immorality, so to speak, of the novel starts to surge. This book apparently has been banned in China for long periods of time. And what's very interesting is that there is a 70 chapter edition, and there is a 100 chapter edition, there's a 120 chapter edition. The 120 chapter edition is the oldest, right? So that has yet to, as far as I've been able to find, has not been widely translated into English and distributed. Um, this is the 70 chapter version, and it's already this big. And that was actually put together by a Chinese scholar in the 1600s. Um, I should pull his name. I can pull his name very quickly. Um, Jin Xingtang, and he considered it one of the greatest works of Chinese literature, and actually cut the story off at 70 chapters and gave it a slightly different ending, like an abrupt ending that showed his disdain of the rebels and the heroes, the outlaws in the story. Which, by the end of the story, frankly, I tended to feel like these outlaws were more demons than heroes, and that's my personal outlook. There are certainly things you can take into account. Again, it's a very corrupt government at this time. This takes place actually right before the fall of the Song Dynasty, and just like Romance of the Three Kingdoms, it opens with a plague, and this recurring theme of plagues in Chinese literature, plagues kind of preceding the fall of a dynasty, um, is pretty interesting. It's and I think that's something that might uh, be reflected in history as well as other literature, and something to keep in mind, especially with what we've been through in the last few years. But let's not talk about that. Um, so the the water margin is, as opposed to the Three Kingdoms, a much more like personal tale, a bit smaller scale. Like there are military conflicts. Need some coffee. There are military conflicts, but they happen on a smaller scale, and you really do get to know each of the characters on a bit more of a personal level. There's tons of drinking. Oh man, like these characters, literally every other page are feasting and drinking wine. They beat people up to get wine. They go crazy for wine, man. Like especially in the beginning, that monk, the guy who goes to the monastery and then gets kicked out of the monastery. He'll do anything for a glass of wine. Um, there is just wine all over this book, wine and blood and sex and all kinds of just like immoral behavior all over this book. And despite having Confucian values, it kind of seems to me like if this is a reflection of Confucian values, they don't really care about killing. What they care about is like be faithful to your parents, and don't be an adulterous woman. That's that's kind of what I got out of this. If I'm just using this book, I'm sure there's a lot more to it than that. Of course, there is. I'm not an expert on Chinese culture by any means. I've just read a couple of the classics and listened to the podcast. So, take this for what it is. Um, but Romance of the Three Kingdoms is a much more sprawling um, epic that I, in some ways, enjoy more than Water Margin, but it's hard to say. I loved both of these classic Chinese novels for different reasons. Romance of the Three Kingdoms is kind of about the futility of building an empire or a dynasty because all that rises must fall. And as you might suspect, Romance of the Three Kingdoms is about three major warring kingdoms and the personalities of the rulers that created them. And all three personalities are different, but none of them really, spoiler alert, none of them really come out the winner of the war or their descendants. Everything just kind of falls back apart by the end of the novel. In the Water Margin, um, just like in the Three Kingdoms, there's a lot of gray characters, but instead of them being based on mostly historical figures like the Three Kingdoms is, this is mostly fictional. Gao Qi, the soccer player who rises to be the corrupt official and the main antagonist of the events to follow, he is actually a historical figure, uh, but and also the main outlaw of the novel, the one we spend the most time with, is Song Jiang. Sorry if I pronounced that badly. And he is actually a historical figure as well, but everybody else pretty much is invented. But the characters, again, as I say, range from gray to absolutely despicable. There's not a single character in this book that is the shining example of morality. And you can ask a lot of questions about this. Is this a reflection of their times? Is this a reflection of how the Chinese viewed the rebel? Is this a reflection of human nature? Another theme I think raised by the book is, can there be redemption for them? Because now I'm going to enter a little bit of a spoiler section, but I don't really think I'm spoiling a lot. But if you do want to just experience this and read the stories of all these outlaws and how they became the 108 outlaws of the Marsh without any spoilers, go for it. But now, I really do want to talk more about the themes of the novel while it's fresh in my head, and it was so impactful. So, um, again, I kind of talked about how in the beginning of the novel it's very humorous, right? It's very humorous, and I was laughing a lot and very entertaining. But then when the novel started to take some darker turns, that was when I was like, whoa. And oh, there's also cannibalism in this book, by the way. Yeah, there's an inn. There's an inn, and these are two heroes, right? Two of the heroes of the novel, part of the Outlaws, who run this inn. It's a husband and wife, and they basically knock travelers out and turn them into meat, which they feed, which they sell to the commoners, um, or feed their guests with it. So one of them is called the night. The woman's called the Night Witch, and the other guy, I can't remember his name. They all have nicknames too. There's so many cool things about this book. It's all just coming out of me like flowing. I, it's just, there's so many cool things in this index. Every single one has a nickname. Divine Doctor, Daylight Rat, God of Death, uh, Flowery Necked Tiger. You got um, and then you got a list of characters who do not appear, who do not join the heroes at Langshing Marsh, and one of them is called Stinking Dickhead. And that leads me to the translation. Actually, not a lot is known about the translator, from what I can tell, J.H. Jackson, but he is quite the translator, I would say. I really enjoyed how off the cuff and like just wild the translation was. Like And from listening to the podcast by John Zhu, I I don't feel like this is way off. There are a few things that are different because he's translating direct from the original work and telling us about it. Um, it's a good translation. It really is. And like I said, you're really only going to find the 700 or the 70 chapter version out there. So this and that was something I wanted to talk about, the difference between the 120 and the 70 chapter version. So the 120 chapter version, the arc of the story, this is the original story, right? And some debate whether it was all written by the same person, but we'll get into that in a second. So the 120 chapter version has an arc where at the end, all of the 108 heroes are united, and they see a tablet up in the heavens that say that this is the will of heaven and so on. And Songjian, now the leader of all of these rebels, um, and based on a vision that he had earlier where this goddess basically told him, you have to be good from now on or you'll meet a horrible end or something like that. um, Songjian's character arc actually continues into this next part, and he mentions it at the end of the 70 chapter version. But he says, we're going to seek amnesty from the emperor and put our banditry and our violent natures in service of the emperor, to do good instead of causing disorder and so on. So Songjian seeks out plans to seek out the amnesty. And then this all leads to them eventually being kind of betrayed because they are sent to go fight a dangerous war in the north. Many of the outlaws are killed. And then Songjian returns and is poisoned by some of the corrupt officials, and things end in tragedy. So the way the 70 chapter version ends does not give the heroes this arc. Although Songjian says we're going to seek amnesty and all this, one of the outlaws immediately after this, and this was an addition by the compiler, the 17th century compiler of this book. He added at the end, showing his disdain for the outlaws, a vision where one of the outlaws sees a vision in that he and all the other outlaws are captured and sentenced to be executed. So that author basically saw no redemption, or we can call him a scholar of 17th century China who compiled the most known version of Water Margin that's translated into English. He had a disdain for the rebels and saw them as completely immoral and no redemption, right? Whereas the original story actually saw a redemption arc for them, or paying off like their bad karma by going to fight for the emperor or something like that. This one just sees them as no redemption, they need to be executed. Ironically, I looked into this Jin Shengtang, this scholar who compiled the 70 chapter version and ended it with that vision of the rebels being executed, actually was executed for protesting a corrupt official along with some other scholars. So that is kind of the ironic, I guess, twist of this. So yeah, that is the story, I guess, of the story, of how the story was put together, written, and has come to us today. So, there was one scene in particular. So I was talking about the phases of the book, right? You had the funny and entertaining, but then it starts to take like a darker turn. And a great example of that, and something I wanted to call out, is there is a part about halfway, almost exactly halfway through the book, where a general, Huang Xin, is charged with attacking the rebels, leading an army to attack the outlaws. And this Huang Xin is defeated and captured and brought to the stronghold of the rebels. Now, they keep him there 4 or 5 days, treat him well because they want him to join them, but he says, no, I can't. I can't betray my emperor. I must go back. And so they say, okay, yeah, you can go back, but you have to stay here just a few days, right? Feast with us, recover your strength, so on. So they let him go after this, and Huang Xin goes back to the town, and they won't let him in. They call him a traitor, and they say they've killed his wife and child because he was there last night attacking their town. And Wang Xin puts two and two together, and he realizes, oh, the rebels have worn my armor. Somebody had his armor on and led a fake attack against the village. So and that led to the death of his wife and child. So now he has nobody, and he has no choice, but he has nowhere to go and no choice. If he wants to live, he has to join the rebels, the outlaws. And this is a great example of their mafia tactics all throughout the water margin. This is like, okay, more so than like a Robin Hood or like Mehmed My Hawk. This feels like a mafia story, like this band of 108 outlaws that's forming. They're a big mafia, really. So and all, again, ranging from gray, which is very few of them, to despicable. There's also a few women that end up fighting among their ranks, which is really interesting. There's small mentions, so despite all of there's a lot of parts in the book that, as a modern reader, you're going to find misogynistic and very shocking that things turned out that way, and kind of like, ugh, really? There's times when you just want these outlaws, these heroes, and even the main ones, even like the ones that are the main heroes of the story, just do like despicable things to women. They're merciless to some of the other people, like commoners. And then you have like those ones that are selling like human meat to the commoners. It's like these are demons like among the living, I swear to God. And there's magic later in the book. There's a wizard. There's all this crazy stuff. I mean, I could just go on and on by all of the fantastic stuff that's in the book and the bad stuff, and it's all together. You get the whole package. But then so I was saying, like, at the same time, you have this sort of, you're gonna find stuff in this book misogynistic, but there are also like women that participate in with the outlaws and help them further their advance. Although I don't know if you would say that's a good character either. Again, ranging from gray to absolutely despicable and demonic are the characters of this book. So that is, what do I think of it? What can I even express more of my opinion of this book than what I have already said? Effing read it. It is a great novel of the past. It is a novel that is still relevant to today by showing all of humanity's immorality. We are not far from the world that this depicts. We never are. The civilized world that we hold dear, in whatever form that's taking, even if it's filled with corrupt politicians, even if it's filled with this and that, it is still. This book kind of shows you what is the alternative. What world is the alternative to having some kind of societal order, right? And we are never far away from that. Even in Romance of the Three Kingdoms, what do you get? You get a plague, you get a rebellion, and then you get these big bands of warring people. And caught in between are always the little people, like you and me, the commoners. And our own morality, these monstrous characters who do both horrible and great and terrible and impressive feats, are reflections of our own nature as well. We can't forget that. So it's these things that come from the human mind. Perhaps this is like, it makes me wonder, like, was there ever a time, was there ever a reality this brutal? And it's so hard to imagine because, I mean, I've traveled a little bit, I've seen other countries, and it's hard for me to imagine a world this brutal. And this window into this, and all of the thought around it. This book is truly an endless thought experiment, and there's so many ways you can approach the characters, and I have only just begun to understand both this book and the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, and maybe there just won't even be enough time in my life to understand these books further, as I'm gonna keep reading the world. But hey, at this pace, I'll have read the world within uh, 3 years at most. So if I keep this up, yeah, this book took over a month to read, and that was reading like every day a little bit, pretty much. Um, so it's doable. You know, it's not that difficult to read. Again, this translation is particularly entertaining, so I wouldn't be put off by that. I do recommend it, and that's all I really have. So, yeah, I just never know how to conclude talking about such an impactful and monstrous work like this, or something that's so important and bigger than I am. I mean, everybody in China knows about this book and these heroes. Everybody in China knows about Romance of the Three Kingdoms. It's their mythology, their, you know, it's just built into the culture, these heroes, from what I can understand. So it's important stuff to know if you want to understand that side of the world. Um, anyway, I do have some books coming up, but I don't know that I want to announce them yet because um, I don't know. I haven't thought it out too much. But for sure, I'm going to be working on, from Cuba, Alejo Carpentier's um, Sigo de las Luces, as I mentioned in the last video. And actually, there's one thing I'm going to announce. I'm planning to do a bonus episode for China, because now that I have one from the deep past, I also wanted to balance it out with something more recent. And that is Yan Gei's Strange Beasts of China, which is actually a recent fantasy novel. It was actually written in 2006, but only recently published in English. And Yan Gei, it says, was born in Sichuan, China, and is the author of 13 books. She's received numerous awards in China, I believe, and this is her first book to be published in the United States. The I've read the first two chapters, and it actually gripped me. I wasn't sure that I was going to do this one. I was skeptical, but yeah, actually the first two chapters were really interesting, and I think I can get through it pretty quickly. So I think I'm gonna do a like video number 22.5 for China. And I'm not China's a huge country, so I think a huge population, so I think I can justify adding one more book for it in there. I'm not going to do that with every country, obviously, but yeah, so look forward to that. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. I hope I don't bore you too much with my rambling, but it's kind of just all over the place. And, again, I do appreciate comments or ideas that you may have, and I hope that some of my talking has introduced you to new literature and will give you some motivation to go out there and bring some new stuff that maybe I've never heard of. So I always love to hear about your ideas too for books. I think I'll probably start publishing a list of the few countries that I don't have an idea for, or maybe the countries that I haven't bought one for. There's very few that I don't have an idea for, but I have bought, I mean, like, I have a book for almost 80 countries at this point. So, but that's still like only half. So anyway, I'm done. Thank you again. Have a great day, and take care.